Welcome to this channel, where every story reveals hidden truths about love, family, and resilience. Here we tell the kinds of dramas that keep you on the edge of your seat and remind you how powerful a woman's voice can be. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a moment. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a story. It's a reflection of choices, secrets, and the strength it takes to face them. They say life after 70 should be peaceful, a time to rest, to savor the fruits of a lifetime of work, to bask in the warmth of family. But let me tell you something. Peace is a luxury you can't afford when the very people sitting at your dinner table are plotting your death. It was supposed to be a celebration, my retirement party. I had just signed the final papers selling my consulting firm, an empire I built with blood and sleepless nights after my husband passed away 15 years ago. $23 million. That was the figure printed in black ink on the closing statement. Though in truth, the value was far more than money. It was validation, proof that every sacrifice, every lonely night at my desk, every decision that people doubted, had meant something. My son Michael insisted on the party. "Mom, you deserve this," he said, his brown eyes so earnest it almost broke me. "Let Jessica handle the details. You just enjoy yourself." Jessica! My daughter-in-law, beautiful, polished, ambitious in ways that often left me uneasy. She wasn't a cruel woman, not on the surface, but her warmth always felt calculated, like she had studied it in a manual titled, How to Be the Perfect Wife. When there's money involved, she adored luxury. Handbags that cost more than most people's mortgage payments. Jewelry with price tags she made sure to flash when the light hit just right. Clothes that whispered prestige. And she was always careful to remind me, subtly, that such tastes required resources beyond what Michael's struggling architectural firm could provide. Still, I played along. What mother doesn't want harmony in her son's marriage? That evening, my kitchen was alive with chatter. Laughter bounced off the marble counters. Glasses clinked. The scent of roasted duck and rosemary filled the air. Neighbors, old colleagues, former business partners, all gathered to toast me. A small orchestra of voices weaving together, celebrating a 70-year-old woman who had proven she was not too old to make history in business. Jessica, the reluctant hostess of every Thanksgiving past, had transformed into Martha Stewart incarnate. Flowers perfectly arranged, champagne glasses lined like soldiers on the counter, napkins folded in crisp triangles. She even hired a bartender. "Nothing's too good for you, Sarah," she gushed, gripping my arm with nails so sharp and polished they could slice paper. That's when I noticed it. She stood near the champagne table, glancing around nervously, as if waiting for a moment when all eyes drifted elsewhere. Then, with hands steadier than I'd ever seen on her, she pulled a small vial from her designer purse. A vial so tiny it could have been perfume or an essential oil. But my gut told me otherwise. She tipped it discreetly into one specific glass. My glass, the one with the faint chip on the rim I always used at gatherings. The air shifted. Laughter blurred into static in my ears. I had faced ruthless competitors in the boardroom. Men who would bleed you dry with a smile. But betrayal from a woman married to my son, that pierced deeper than any corporate war ever had. Now, a normal woman might have screamed, knocked the glass away, exposed her in front of everyone. But 70 years on this earth had taught me restraint. I'd survived widowhood, raised a son alone, built a company from scratch. You don't get through that by panicking. No, I smiled, nodded at whatever my former partner was saying about market forecasts, pretended not to notice as Jessica approached, holding the glass with the poisoned rim. "Sarah, you look tired," she said, her voice dripping with fabricated concern. "Here, have some champagne. You've earned it." Her eyes glittered as she pressed the glass toward me. I accepted it, fingers brushing the stem delicately. "Thank you, dear," I replied, my tone warm, steady. She couldn't know that my blood had turned to ice. The room buzzed around us. Neighbors gossiping. music floating faintly from the living room speakers. For 10 minutes I held that glass, pretending to sip, chatting about old times. My heart beating steady. I waited. When Jessica turned away to show off her new tennis bracelet, another indulgence I had no doubt helped fund, I saw my chance. Helen, her mother, stood nearby, a woman often lost in thought, polite but forgetful. Her presence at parties more background than centerpiece. I quietly set the chipped glass next to her purse, then picked up a fresh one for myself. Helen, distracted, reached for the nearest drink without hesitation. She smiled politely, raised it to her lips, and took a sip. Minutes later, her knees buckled. The champagne flute slipped from her hand, shattering against the marble floor. Foam gathered at the corners of her mouth as she convulsed, her body jerking violently. Gasps filled the room. Jessica screamed. Someone call 911. Her voice cracked in what might have passed for shock to anyone else. But not to me. I had seen real panic in the eyes of dying men in boardrooms, in the frantic calls of clients watching fortunes collapse. Real fear leaves no room for performance. Jessica's reaction was rehearsed, controlled, an actress playing grief. I knelt beside Helen, steadying her shaking frame as others rushed to call paramedics. Jessica clutched Michael's arm, her sobs so dramatic they seemed to belong to another scene, another play. And my son, oh my son, his face was pale. Yes, but his eyes darted toward Jessica with something that nearly stopped my heart, a flicker of recognition. Michael knew. The ambulance arrived quickly, red and blue lights splashing across the walls of my home. Paramedics moved with precision, stabilizing Helen, lifting her onto the stretcher. Guests whispered, their party clothes suddenly feeling inappropriate for what had become a crime scene without proof. As the stretcher rolled out, Jessica clung tighter to Michael. "Mom, you don't need to come," Michael said firmly when I reached for my keys. "We'll handle everything. You should stay here, rest after the party." How considerate. Keep the target at home, safely contained, while they figured out what went wrong with their little plan. Nonsense, I said, my tone firm, my eyes locking on Jessica's trembling hands. Helen is practically family. I'm coming. Their silence was answer enough. That night, as the sirens faded into the distance and the house grew quiet, I felt the weight of realization settle over me. They had tried to poison me at my own retirement party. The woman my son loved, the woman I had tolerated for his happiness, had looked at me not as a mother-in-law, but as a number on a bank statement. But if she thought she could outwit me, an old woman who had spent decades outmaneuvering sharks in suits, she was wrong. Deadly wrong? The flashing red and blue lights faded as the ambulance carried Helen away into the night. Neighbors lingered on the sidewalk, murmuring, their curious eyes darting between me and the couple clinging to each other on my front porch. Jessica sobbed dramatically, her mascara running in careful streaks down her face. But I noticed how her sobs quieted each time someone looked away, how she stole glances at Michael as if to gauge his reaction. And Michael, my son, my boy, stood frozen, his hand gripping her shoulder, his jaw tight. He looked like a man watching something slip out of his grasp, like sand pouring through fingers he could no longer close. I reached for my keys. "I'm going with Helen," I said firmly. Michael stepped in front of me. "Mom, you don't need to. Jessica and I will handle this. You should rest after all that excitement." Excitement! The word seared my chest. Helen foaming at the mouth on my kitchen floor was excitement. "Nonsense," I said, pushing past him. "Helen is practically family." Jessica's tear-streaked face faltered, just for a second before she caught herself. At the hospital, sterile white lights replaced the warm glow of my kitchen. The sharp scent of antiseptic burned my nose. I sat near the nurse's station, pretending to thumb through a magazine while keeping my ears sharp. Doctors whispered words I recognized. Alkaloids, toxins, acute poisoning. The phrases slipped like knives between my ribs. Jessica paced, her designer heels clicking against the linoleum like a metronome, marking each beat of her anxiety. She clutched her coffee so tightly her hands trembled. Michael sat rigid in a chair, his phone buzzing incessantly in his pocket. He glanced at the screen, jaw tightening, then slipped it back without answering. Hours passed. When the doctor finally emerged, Jessica rushed forward, her voice high and thin. "Is she okay? Please, that's my mother." "She's stable," the doctor said, "but she'll remain overnight. We found signs of poisoning, though the exact substance is still being analyzed." Jessica gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Poisoning? Oh no, she must have eaten something bad." I tilted my head, studying her face. "Yes." Lucky she only had a few sips of champagne before collapsing. Her heel caught for the briefest instant on the linoleum. Just a stumble, but I noticed. "Champagne," she repeated, her voice suddenly sharp. "You think it was the champagne?" "Oh, probably nothing," I said, waving my hand dismissively. "Just an old woman's imagination." But her face paled, and her fingers trembled as she brought the coffee to her lips. Michael's eyes flicked from her to me, calculating, searching. By the time dawn broke, Helen was declared stable but sedated. "Family only," the doctor said. "And she needs rest. Come back tomorrow." Michael hurried to my side. "Mom, maybe you shouldn't drive home alone after what happened. Stay with us tonight." How considerate. They had failed to poison me. So now they wanted me under their roof, where an accident could happen more quietly. "That's sweet of you," I said softly, kissing his cheek. "But I'll be fine. I've got that new security system, remember? I left before they could press further." Back home, I poured a glass of champagne from a fresh, unopened bottle, letting the bubbles rise as I carried it into my study. I sat at the desk where I had signed contracts worth millions, where I had once written paychecks that supported dozens of families. I stared at the numbers scrawled on my notepad. 23,000. That was the figure they saw in their dreams. I thought of Michael's firm, the architectural projects that never quite paid off, the recession that gutted his income, Jessica's boutique jewelry shop, more showroom than business, surviving on appearances rather than profit, their grand house in Westfield, 3 times larger than they could afford, the BMW, the Mercedes, all show, no stability. And then I thought of the checks I had written over the years, the tuition payments, the down payment for their house, the gifts I gave when they said money was tight, nearly $200,000 in 5 years. At the time, I called them investments in their happiness. Now, I realized they may have seen them differently. Not gifts, not generosity, but early withdrawals from the inheritance they were impatient to collect. The phone rang, jolting me from my thoughts. "Jessica! Sarah!" she said, her voice syrupy with concern. I couldn't sleep. "After what happened to Mom?" I kept worrying. "Are you sure you're okay? You didn't feel sick at all, did you?" How thoughtful, checking whether her poison had reached its intended target. "No, dear. I feel fine." "Have the doctors said anything more?" "They think maybe she ate something on an empty stomach. You know how she is with her medications, always forgetting." I nearly laughed. Helen managed her pills with military precision, each dose labeled, scheduled, checked off like clockwork. She was forgetful about names, yes, but never her medicine. "That's a relief," I said calmly. "I was worried it might have been something at the party." Jessica's reply was quick. "Too quick. Oh no, definitely not." The doctors were clear it wasn't the food or drink. Just one of those things. Her eagerness to close the subject told me everything I needed to know. After hanging up, I walked into the kitchen. The champagne bottle still sat on the counter, nearly full, its golden liquid glinting innocently in the morning light. I ran my fingers along the glass, imagining sending it to a lab. Not yet, I thought. Timing mattered. The doorbell rang. Michael smiling, carrying pastries. My favorite. His eyes soft, his voice warm. For a moment, I saw the little boy who once brought me dandelions, who begged me to hang his drawings on the refrigerator. For a moment, I almost believed him. Then he said, "Mom, Jessica and I have been thinking about your situation. You're 70 now, alone in this big house. That party showed how fragile life can be. Don't you think it's time to plan ahead?" And in that moment, the boy I raised vanished. In his place sat a man willing to use my own near death as leverage. A suspicion hardened into certainty. They weren't just careless. They weren't just greedy, they were plotting against me. And they had no idea that I had already begun plotting against them. Morning sunlight spilled into my kitchen, painting the marble countertops with a soft golden glow. But it couldn't chase away the chill inside my chest. Helen's collapse replayed in my mind like a looped film reel. The champagne glass slipping, the foam at her mouth. Jessica's scream too perfect to be real. I was stirring honey into my tea when the doorbell rang. Through the glass pane, I saw Michael standing there, holding a familiar white box tied with string. Pastries, from my favorite bakery. The gesture should have been sweet. Instead, it felt rehearsed. "Morning, Mom," he said as I opened the door. His voice was gentle, his smile carefully measured. "I thought you might not have eaten much yesterday, after everything." I stepped aside, letting him in. He moved around my kitchen with practiced ease, setting the pastries on the counter, opening cabinets, finding plates and cups as if he were still that boy who grew up in this house. For a brief moment, I saw flashes of the past. Him standing on a stool to reach the cookie jar. Him spilling milk across the counter while insisting he could pour it himself. But then he turned, pastry knife in hand, and spoke with the calm tone of a man closing a deal. "Mom, Jessica and I have been talking about your situation." I raised an eyebrow. "My situation? You're 70 now," he said, slicing the Danish too neatly for a man distracted by concern. "Living alone in this big house with all that money from the sale. It's a lot for one person to manage." There it was, the opening statement of their pitch. I sipped my tea. "I've managed fine so far." His smile wavered, then returned. "But what if something happened? Yesterday proved how fragile life can be. Helen collapsed, and if it had been you—" I cut him off, my voice sharper than I intended. "If it had been me, 30 witnesses would have called an ambulance, and I'd be in the hospital just like Helen." He flinched, then recovered, running a hand through his hair. The same nervous tic he'd had since adolescence. "Mom, that's not what I meant. I worry about you. Jessica worries too. Jessica's worry could buy itself a new tennis bracelet," I thought bitterly. Michael pressed on. "We've been researching some options. Safe places, communities for active seniors, places with friends, activities, medical staff on site. You wouldn't be alone." I set my cup down deliberately. "And what kind of places are these?" He brightened, pulling out his phone. "Sunset Manor. It's like a resort. Golf courses, spas, cultural events. It's not a nursing home. It's a lifestyle. You'd love it." The words slid across the table like a contract. The images on his phone showed smiling seniors playing bridge, swimming in a pool, painting in art classes. But I saw it differently. Isolation, control, a velvet cage. "And what's the cost of this paradise?" I asked. He hesitated, then answered too casually. "There's an entrance fee, 400,000, but it covers everything. Housing, meals, care for life. It's an investment, 400,000. Enough to drain a chunk of my liquid assets, enough to tie me down while leaving them room to maneuver. And," he added, his voice softer now, "they require power of attorney paperwork, just in case you can't make decisions. It's standard, nothing to worry about." My hand stilled on the teacup. "Power of attorney." With one signature, I would hand them the keys to my fortune. I forced a warm smile. "That sounds thoughtful." Inside, rage simmered, because I finally understood. The champagne hadn't been a one-time attempt. It was just one weapon in their arsenal. If poison failed, they'd bury me in legal paperwork, tuck me into Sunset Manor and siphon my life away, one decision at a time. I watched him closely, memorizing every word, every expression. He believed he was guiding me gently toward a safe, reasonable choice. He believed his script. Jessica's script was flawless. But they had underestimated me. Perhaps I should see it for myself, I said, feigning hesitation. His face lit up. "That's a great idea. We could visit next week, maybe even reserve a spot before it fills." I nodded, keeping my expression soft, motherly. "Yes, maybe." After he left, I wandered through the empty house. The silence was heavy, pressing against me. I traced my fingers along the photographs on the wall. Michael at 5, holding up a kite twice his size. Michael at 16, grinning next to his first car. Michael at his wedding, standing beside Jessica, both of them radiant, hopeful, promising me I was gaining a daughter, not losing a son. I had believed them. Now I knew better. Family no longer meant love and protection. It meant betrayal wrapped in smiles. I poured myself another glass of champagne, this time from an untouched bottle, and stared at the bubbles rising in the glass. Let them set their trap. They thought they were the hunters, but I had spent a lifetime surviving wolves in silk ties and snakes in designer dresses, and I was already planning a trap of my own. That evening the sun dipped below the horizon, casting my neighborhood in long shadows, the kind of twilight that made everything look softer, calmer, except my heart. My chest carried the heavy rhythm of suspicion and the sharper edge of certainty. The doorbell rang just as I set my wine glass on the table. Through the monitor, I saw Michael and Jessica standing together. His hands were shoved in his pockets, nervous, while she stood poised, her smile painted on like lacquer. I opened the door. "Well, isn't this a surprise?" "Sarah," Jessica said warmly, her tone sugar-coated. "We've been so worried since the party. It would really set our minds at ease if you came to stay with us for a while." Michael stepped forward quickly, eager to back her up. "Just for a few days? Until we know Helen's completely fine. And until we're sure you're safe." "Safe!" I nearly laughed. Their idea of safety was me under their roof, tucked neatly where they could monitor every sip, every pill, every breath. I folded my arms and let the silence fill the space. Michael shifted from one foot to the other. Jessica dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Too perfectly timed. "Finally?" I said softly. "That's thoughtful of you, but I'm perfectly fine here." Jessica's mask cracked for a second. "Are you, though?" Her voice sharpened. "You're 70, Sarah. What if something happens and no one finds you for days?" The words slid out like rehearsed lines, the very ones Michael had fed me earlier. They'd practiced this script together, believing it would break me down through repetition. I leaned back against the doorway and smiled faintly. "You're right. Anything could happen at my age." I let my voice drop just enough for the words to sting, which is exactly why I updated my will this afternoon. The temperature in the room plummeted. Michael's face drained of color, his lips parting in shock. Jessica froze mid-blink, the tissue still pressed against her cheek. "Oh," she asked, her tone suddenly careful. "What kind of updates?" I held Michael's gaze, steady and unyielding, the same way I had when he was 8 years old, and trying to convince me he hadn't broken my favorite vase. Just some adjustments to reflect my current priorities. The silence was suffocating. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall grew deafening. Jessica's knuckles whitened as she clenched the tissue. Michael swallowed hard, glancing toward the corner of the room where the new security camera blinked red. He had noticed. I didn't flinch. Let him see that I was watching. "Of course," Jessica said finally, forcing her lips into a smile. "I'm sure whatever you decided was for the best." I smiled sweetly. "I think so too." They didn't stay much longer. Excuses about needing rest, needing to check on Helen, spilled from their mouths as they shuffled out. But I didn't miss the way Jessica avoided my eyes, or the way Michael hesitated at the threshold, his jaw clenched tight. Through the monitor, I watched them once they reached the driveway. They didn't leave right away. Instead, they sat in the car for nearly 10 minutes, their silhouettes twisted, hands gesturing sharply, Jessica's profile sharp as glass. At one point, she pulled out her phone and made a call, her arm slicing the air as she spoke angrily. Michael reached for the phone, trying to quiet her, but she shoved him away. Finally, headlights cut through the night as they pulled away. I poured myself a glass of wine and settled into my chair. The liquid shimmered in the low lamplight, its surface calm even as storms brewed in my house. They believed they had cornered me, that they could use concern as a mask, manipulate me into submission. They thought a few rehearsed lines about age and safety would scare me into handing them everything I owned. But they had underestimated the very thing that had carried me through 70 years. Patience. Patience had built my company. Patience had raised my son. And now, patience would dismantle their schemes, one careful step at a time. For now I would play along, smile at their concern, nod at their suggestions, sip the tea they poured with trembling hands. Let them believe their performance was convincing, because sometimes the best way to catch a snake isn't to crush it outright. It's to let it slither closer, coiling tighter, until it's so entangled in its own trap that it can't escape. I took a long sip of wine, savoring the quiet triumph in my chest. The game had shifted. They thought they were pulling me into their plan, but I had just lured them deeper into mine. The next morning dawned gray and damp, clouds heavy with rain. I woke early, not because I couldn't sleep, but because sleep no longer came easily. The memory of Jessica's smirk, the way Michael's voice had softened when he asked for power of attorney. It replayed in my head, gnawing at me like termites chewing through wood. I dressed with precision, choosing a navy suit I hadn't worn since my last board meeting. It still fit, a reminder to myself and to anyone who saw me that I was not a frail old woman in need of guardianship. I was Sarah Wilson, 70 years old, but still sharper than the knives in my kitchen. David Hartwell's office sat on the 15th floor of a glass tower downtown. I had known David for over 2 decades. He was a man of quiet authority, his salt and pepper hair always perfectly combed, his suits impeccable. More importantly, he was loyal. To me, not to my son or his wife. "Sarah!" He greeted me warmly, rising to shake my hand. "To what do I owe the honor?" "Someone tried to kill me," I said bluntly. His expression flickered but quickly settled into calm professionalism. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told him about Jessica with the vial, Helen collapsing, Michael urging me to stay home, their sudden obsession with Sunset Manor. I laid it all out like evidence on a courtroom table. David leaned back, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Are you certain about what you saw?" "As certain as I am sitting here." He nodded slowly. "Then we need to act quickly. Evidence of poisoning might be difficult to secure, but even if we do, Jessica will claim it was an accident, or that her mother was the intended victim, not you. Without witnesses to the vial itself, it's circumstantial." I clenched my fists. "So she walks free?" "Not if we outthink her," David said, his eyes sharpened. "First, we establish your competence. If Michael and Jessica intend to pursue power of attorney, they'll likely argue you're unfit to manage your own affairs. We'll preempt that. A psychiatric evaluation notarized, proving you are fully capable." The words cut deep. My son, my own flesh and blood, planning to brand me incompetent on paper, to reduce me to a liability. "What else?" I asked, my voice low. "We restructure your estate. Right now your assets are vulnerable. We'll create trusts they can't access, directives only you control. If they want to play games, they'll have to play by your rules." Relief flickered through me, quickly followed by grief. I had spent a lifetime protecting Michael, lifting him from his failures, bailing him out when bills piled too high. And now here I was, protecting myself from him. David leaned forward. "Sarah, this isn't just about money. It's about power. They want control, not just wealth. If we cut off their access, we cut off their leverage." I nodded, forcing my voice steady. "Do it! Whatever it takes." For the next 2 hours, I signed papers, initialed amendments, and approved structures that locked my fortune behind iron doors. The new will transferred most of my wealth into charitable trusts, scholarships for underprivileged students, cancer research funds, local women's shelters. Michael would receive a modest trust, enough to keep him afloat, but not enough to tempt greed. Jessica's name vanished entirely. By the time I left David's office, my life's work was shielded. My fortune could no longer be their prize. But the victory felt hollow. That night, I sat in my study with the folder of documents on my lap. My hands trembled. Not from fear, but from grief so heavy it pressed on my chest like lead. I remembered Michael at 12, sobbing when he failed his math test. I had stayed up all night helping him study, promising him he was smart enough, strong enough. I remembered him at 25, crushed when his first architectural firm went bankrupt, and how I had written a check to cover his debts. I remembered him holding newborn Emma, his eyes shining with pride, whispering, "I'll never let you down, Mom." And now, here he was, plotting with his wife to steal everything I had built, to strip me of dignity, of freedom, of life itself. The tears came hot and bitter. I wiped them away angrily. I would not cry over betrayal. Not tonight. My phone buzzed. A text from Jessica. "I hope you're resting, Sarah. Just checking on you. Love you." Love. The word burned on the screen. I deleted the message. An hour later, another buzz. Michael this time. "Mom, let's talk tomorrow. I know yesterday was a lot. We just want what's best for you." What's best for me? His definition of best was my imprisonment in Sunset Manor. My life signed away on documents he would forge with David's replacement. I turned the phone face down, staring at the folder on my lap. My fortune was safe. My legal standing was stronger. But my heart was shattered. For the first time in 70 years, I felt truly alone. And yet, beneath the grief, a fire burned. They thought they had cornered me. They thought their trap was flawless. But they had forgotten who I was. I didn't survive widowhood, build a company from nothing, and rise above every man who said I couldn't, just to let my own family destroy me. I stood, wiped my tears, and poured myself a glass of wine. The liquid shimmered under the lamplight, a reflection of the woman I refused to stop being. Let Michael and Jessica plot their schemes. The game had only just begun. 2 days passed before Michael came again. The knock at the door was familiar, almost casual, as if nothing had changed. Through the security camera, I saw him holding another white box of pastries, his shoulders slightly hunched. That smile, that boyish smile he had always used to soften me, was plastered across his face. I opened the door, letting him step inside. The smell of sugar and butter filled the air as he placed the box on the counter. He moved easily through the kitchen, opening drawers and cabinets, as though this was still his home. For a moment, I almost saw the child he had once been. Almost. "Morning, Mom," he said gently. "Thought you might like company." I sat at the table watching him pour coffee without asking. It was automatic, his hands steady. It might have felt comforting once. Now it was a performance. "Sit down, Michael," I said. "We should talk." He joined me, steam curling between us. For a moment, silence stretched like a taut rope, threatening to snap. Then he cleared his throat. "Mom, Jessica and I, we just want you safe. You know that, right? Sunset Manor really is the best option." I raised an eyebrow. "Safe from what, Michael? From loneliness? From falls?" My voice hardened. "Or from poisoned champagne?" His face drained of color. He opened his mouth, closed it, then forced a laugh. "That was an accident. A horrible accident. You're letting it get to you." I leaned forward. "I saw her, Michael. I saw Jessica pour something into my glass. Do you deny that?" His eyes darted away, his fingers tightening around his cup. "You're imagining things. Maybe you had too much to drink. You know how memory can play tricks." I slammed my palm against the table. "Don't patronize me. I built a company from nothing. I haven't lost my mind. Don't you dare pretend I'm senile." His jaw tightened. For a moment, I saw guilt flicker across his face. Then came something worse. "Resolve. There's an opening at Sunset Manor," he said quietly. "But it has to be filled by Friday. They need the entrance fee up front." There it was. The push. $400,000. I said flatly. He blinked. Do you think I don't know the price of cages dressed up as resorts?" I asked, my voice low and sharp. He shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, it's not like that. It's a community. You'd have people around. You wouldn't be alone. And if something happens, and the power of attorney," I interrupted. "So you can handle things if I'm, what was the word? Unable." He looked away, shame flickering across his features. But then, like Jessica, he gathered himself and leaned forward. "It's just practical. Someone has to be prepared. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Harder. The word sliced through me. He said it like this was inevitable. Like my resistance was the only obstacle left between him and Jessica's vision of the future. I studied him. My son. The boy I had raised. the man I had believed in, the father of my granddaughter. I wanted to see innocence in his eyes, but all I found was calculation. "Michael," I said softly, my throat tight. "How much debt are you in?" His head jerked back. "What?" "Your firm. Jessica's boutique. The cars, the house. How deep are you?" He swallowed hard. His silence answer enough. My heart cracked, but I kept my voice steady. "So that's what this is about." "Not my safety, not my loneliness. It's about the bills stacked on your desk, the creditors circling like vultures. You'd sell your own mother's freedom to save yourself." "Don't say it like that," he snapped. His mask slipped, anger flashing. "You don't understand, Mom. You've never failed at anything. You don't know what it's like to have everything slipping away." I stared at him, pain twisting inside me. "I do know. I lost your father. I built a life from ashes. I know what it's like to lose. But I never betrayed the people I loved to save myself." For a moment, the mask cracked completely. He looked at me with eyes full of shame, of conflict. Then his phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at the screen. Jessica's name lighting up in bold letters, and the softness vanished. He stood abruptly. "We'll talk again soon. Just think about Sunset Manor, okay? Before it's too late." "Too late." The words hung in the air long after he left, a threat disguised as concern. When the door clicked shut, silence filled the house again. I rose slowly, walking through the rooms as though they belonged to someone else. Photographs lined the walls. Michael as a boy with a missing tooth. Emma as a toddler clinging to his neck. My late husband smiling beside me on a beach vacation. I touched each frame, my fingers lingering. Once these images were proof of love. Now they felt like relics of a family that no longer existed. In my study, I sat at the desk, staring at the folder David had given me. The papers were in order, my fortune shielded. But my heart, it was in ruins. Family used to mean protection, sacrifice, love. Now it meant betrayal. And yet, even as grief weighed on me, anger flared brighter. They thought guilt would break me. They thought loneliness would trap me. But they had forgotten. I hadn't survived 70 years to surrender now. If Michael and Jessica wanted war, I would give them war. Not with poison, not with shouting, but with patience, with law, with truth, and with the strength of a woman who refused to be erased. Friday morning arrived with a heavy sky, swollen with dark clouds that promised rain. I woke before dawn, my heart steady but my mind sharp, rehearsing every move of the day like a chess player preparing for the final match. Today was the deadline Michael had spoken of. The day Sunset Manor supposedly needed its fee. The day their trap would spring. I brewed a pot of coffee and sat at my desk, the documents David had prepared neatly stacked in a folder. My pen traced the edge of the papers, the altered power of attorney that gave Michael access to nothing but a bank account with $1, the new trust agreements that locked my fortune out of his reach. I was ready. At precisely 9 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Through the camera feed, I saw them. Michael in a crisp navy suit, his tie perfectly knotted, his shoes polished. Jessica in a fitted dress, her hair sleek, her makeup flawless, her lips curled in a smile so practiced it might as well have been painted on. They looked less like a son and daughter-in-law visiting family, and more like salespeople about to close a deal. I opened the door. "Right on time," I said, my voice calm. "Of course," Jessica chirped, stepping inside. "We've got a lot to cover today." Michael carried a briefcase. He placed it on the kitchen table, pulling out papers with the smooth efficiency of a man who had rehearsed this moment. "Mom, I'm so glad you came to your senses," he said, sliding the documents toward me. "This is the agreement with Sunset Manor. All you have to do is sign, and we'll wire the money." Jessica set her laptop on the table, already typing. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her smile never wavered. "And this," she added, "is the power of attorney form, just so Michael can take care of everything if you're unable. It's completely standard." I picked up the pen, letting them believe. "I suppose it's time I start a new chapter," I said softly. Michael's shoulders relaxed. Jessica exhaled audibly, relief flashing across her face. I signed the papers one by one, sliding them back across the table. Michael gathered them quickly, almost hungrily, stacking them neatly. Jessica tapped at her laptop, entering what she believed were my account numbers. They thought they had won, and then the doorbell rang again. "Ah," I said, rising. "That must be David." But when I opened the door, it wasn't David standing there. 2 detectives stepped inside, badges flashing under the morning light. A man and a woman, both with faces carved from stone. "Mrs. Wilson?" the male detective asked. "I'm Detective Morrison. This is Detective Harris. We need to speak with you about an attempted poisoning at your home." The air in the kitchen froze. Jessica's hand stilled on the keyboard. Michael's face went white. "That was my mother," Jessica blurted. She had a reaction to her medication. "It wasn't poisoning." Detective Morrison laid a file on the table, flipping it open. "The toxicology report says otherwise. Helen Peterson ingested a lethal dose of oleander extract. The champagne bottle from that night tested positive as well." Michael's head snapped toward Jessica. "Jess, what did you do?" "I didn't do anything," she cried, her voice cracking. "Why would I poison my own mother?" I stood slowly, my gaze fixed on her. My voice was steady, calm, unyielding. "Because that glass wasn't meant for her. It was meant for me. And I saw you pour it." Jessica's mouth opened, then closed. No words came. Detective Harris slid another document across the table. We also found a life insurance policy. $500,000 taken out on Mrs. Wilson 6 months ago, with you, Jessica Hartwell, listed as the sole beneficiary. The silence that followed was suffocating. Jessica's eyes filled with rage. She lunged to her feet, pointing at me. "You think you're clever, Sarah. You think you can ruin us. You have no idea what you've done." "Oh, I know exactly what I've done," I replied softly. "I've protected myself." Detective Morrison stepped forward, handcuffs gleaming in the dim kitchen light. "Jessica Hartwell, you are under arrest for attempted murder." As the cuffs clicked around her wrists, Jessica twisted, her eyes wild. "Michael, do something! Tell them it wasn't me." But Michael sat frozen, his hands pressed to his forehead, his briefcase forgotten. He looked less like a man and more like a frightened boy caught in a storm. "I never wanted this," he whispered. I thought we could." His voice cracked, breaking under the weight of his own lies. I watched him, my heart hollow. My son, my only child, the boy I had raised, the man I had trusted, betrayal written across his face, not just in Jessica's schemes, but in his silence, his complicity. The detectives led Jessica out, her screams echoing down the hallway. Michael buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking, and in that moment I felt no triumph, no victory, only the hollow ache of a mother watching the boy she had loved vanish, replaced by a man she no longer recognized. The storm outside finally broke, rain slamming against the windows. It sounded like applause, like judgment, like the heavens themselves mourning what had been lost. I stood in the quiet kitchen, my signature still wet on worthless papers, my fortune secure, but my heart shattered. The unmasking was complete, and the cost was more than I had ever imagined. 3 months later, my roses bloomed brighter than ever, their petals, a defiant red against the green, spread wide beneath the late spring sun. I tended them carefully, pruning away the dead stems, watering them each morning, coaxing them back to life. Perhaps it was a coincidence, or perhaps it was a message. Life can return even after poison seeps into the soil. Jessica was gone, 15 years behind bars for attempted murder. Her trial had been brutal, her performance in the courtroom just as rehearsed as at my party. Though this time, the jury wasn't fooled. They had seen the evidence, heard the toxicology reports, studied the insurance policy. Even Michael's hesitant testimony, his stammered, half-hearted attempts to shield her, crumbled under cross-examination. Michael, my son, he had pleaded guilty to conspiracy, hoping for mercy. The judge gave him 3 years. His lawyer called it leniency. To me, it felt like a funeral for a relationship that had already died long before. I visited him once in county jail. Just once. He sat behind the glass, his face gaunt, his eyes rimmed with regret. "Mom," he whispered. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought it was just paperwork. You thought? I interrupted, my voice steady. That I was weak. That I would sign whatever you put in front of me. That my love for you would blind me. Tears filled his eyes. I'm sorry. But apologies don't erase betrayal. They don't heal the fracture of a mother watching her son choose greed over blood. I left without promising to return. At home, the silence was heavy. For the first time in years, I lived without waiting for Michael's calls, without listening for Jessica's footsteps, without wondering what manipulation would come next. The quiet was both lonely and liberating. One evening, the phone rang. My granddaughter Emma. Her voice trembled as she said, "Grandma, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what they were planning. I swear I didn't, sweetheart." I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. "I never blamed you." Her words tumbled quickly, desperate and hopeful. "Can I visit this summer?" "Just me. I need to see you." "Yes," I said firmly. "My door will always be open for you." Emma became my anchor. In her, I saw the possibility of something pure. Love untainted by greed. Family without betrayal. She was proof that not everything had been destroyed. Helen, too, surprised me. The woman who had nearly died in my place reached out once she recovered. We met for coffee twice a week. She had once been background noise in Jessica's shadow, but now she was a steady presence. Two women bound not by choice but by survival. Over steaming cups of tea, she asked me one afternoon, "Do you regret how it ended?" I studied her, her kind eyes lined with age and pain. "I regret that my son made those choices, but I don't regret protecting myself." She nodded slowly, as if she understood too well the price of survival. David, my attorney, visited not long after with good news. "Your estate is airtight," he said. "The trusts are untouchable. If anyone ever tries to challenge your competence, the funds will go directly to charity." Relief washed over me, but it was hollow. Money was safe. My future was secure. But my family, the family I thought I had, was gone. That night I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, watching the sunset bleed gold and pink across the horizon. The garden glowed in the fading light, roses standing tall like sentinels. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "Grandma, I got into Northwestern pre-law, just like you told me to try. I did it." I smiled, my fingers trembling as I typed back. "Congratulations, sweetheart. I'm proud of you." For the first time in months, my chest felt light, hopeful, because this story had never truly been about money. It had been about power, who holds it, who abuses it, who survives when others try to take it. I realized something else too. Age is not weakness. 70 years had given me scars, yes, but also strength, wisdom, patience. And those things are weapons sharper than any knife, deadlier than any poison. Michael and Jessica had underestimated me. They saw only a woman past her prime, a mother blinded by love, a widow clinging to her independence. What they failed to see was the truth. I might be 70, but powerless. Never. The sweetest revenge I've learned isn't punishment. It's not watching your enemies fall or hearing the clink of handcuffs. It's living well, living free. And as the roses swayed gently in the evening breeze, their petals catching the last rays of sun, I knew that I had done exactly that. My life was mine again, and no one, no son, no daughter-in-law, no betrayal could ever take it from me. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. Stories like this remind us that behind every closed door lies a truth waiting to be revealed. And sometimes the quietest voices carry the greatest strength. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Your support helps keep these stories alive and brings more voices to light. And remember, every ending is just the beginning of another story. Stay tuned, because the next one may surprise you even more.